To Dr. Gervais, I think call you all doctor. He's a social psychology PhD candidate here at UBC, and his work primarily focuses on psychology of belief, perceptions of outgroups, atheists in particular, that sort of thing. So he's going to be talking tonight on that, and we're really excited to have him. So give it up for Will.
All right. Well, thank you all for inviting me up. Yeah, so as you mentioned, if I get it, so it's like coming out of this thing. Alright, I'll do a bit more. Like you said, I'm in the psychology department here. My primary focus is in social psychology, and we have kind of a cool core group of people who deal with topics like evolutionary psychology, cultural psychology, how evolution and culture kind of interact and shape people's cognition and behavior. And so I'm kind of situated within that broader climate. My own lab, I work with Dr. Ara Zion, who's my main advisor. We mostly these days look at stuff having to do with religion. So why is it that some people are believers, other people aren't? So I guess on the talk, I wasn't sure whether to go for more of the big picture, broad brushstroke stuff, or more of the details about perceptions of atheists, which I titled the talk after. And I ended up kind of doing a bit of each. So hopefully that leaves everybody just a little bit disappointed. Kind of what they're excited. And I'll start out with some of the broad stuff. So just kind of generally framing why I study what I do, which broad topics I'm interested in, and then towards the end I'll focus more on the perceptions of atheist stuff. So to launch the big picture stuff, I thought it would be helpful to start with a really tired, worn out, cliche thought experiment. So imagine you're an alien, you're visiting Earth, and you want to study what's going on here. You'll notice a lot of organisms having debates and conversations, if you will, about tangible things, like who gets food or who has a bigger mouth. And then there's this one species where they spend a lot of their time having discussions about more abstract beliefs. These beliefs aren't just something that they discuss and fight about, but these belief systems actually have the potential to bring people together into large, more or less cooperative groups. And people are also willing to devote phenomenal amounts of resources to these beliefs. So, for instance, you have the Statue of Liberty or the Lotus Temple in Delhi. So, if you're this alien, this is going to provoke some potentially interesting questions for you. So, why is it that this one species among all of them comes to have these elaborate belief systems? And in particular, you're going to wonder about something psychological. Why is it that, what's going on in their minds that allows them to adhere to these belief systems, to learn them from each other, to actually create the beliefs in the first place, and also what the consequences of these belief systems might be. We turn now from the alien to myself. There we go. So within that broader framework, I'm interested in a lot of those questions, but looking specifically at people's supernatural beliefs. And I think that people's supernatural beliefs are important to look at. They're kind of an ideal test case because they're both practically and theoretically important. On the practical side of things, most of the people who have ever lived have believed in the existence of at least one God. Even today, most people on Earth still do. And these aren't just idle beliefs that people passively hold on to. They're willing to engage in various costly and even painful rituals in the name of these gods. But at the same time, if you look around the world, it's not the case that everyone's a believer. So there's this large, and depending on how you slice the pie, growing minority of people who don't believe that any gods exist. So sociologist Phil Zuckerman, back in 2007, estimated that there are somewhere between 500 and 700 million what he calls organic atheists in the world. And what he means by organic atheists is, if you look at a place like China, government just says to everybody, you are all atheists. He doesn't count that. He's interested in more organically developing, potentially psychologically more rich forms of non-belief. So, semantics there, if he says that there are that many atheists, well, a theist is somebody who does hold the belief that there's a God out there, and atheist is just a negation of that. So atheist, non-believer, pretty much interchangeable terms, and especially throughout the rest of the talk, I'll probably use the two terms interchangeably. So anyway, with that definition in mind, if you look at the world's largest religious groups, you have Christians, followed by Muslims, followed by Hindus, followed by your atheists. So if you crunch the numbers, there's twice as many atheists as Buddhists in the world, 41 times more atheists than Jewish people, 58 times as many atheists as Mormons. So overall, if you're trying to explain religious beliefs, most folks are believers. Historically, this is true. Even in present day, it's true. But there are a whole lot of people who aren't believers. So if you're trying to come up with a psychological and naturalistic account of religion, you're going to want to have some sort of a theoretical story that can accommodate both of these two facts. I have done research on some of this stuff, but it's not necessarily what I'll be focusing on for the most part in this talk. But I think if you have time again, feel free to have a question about this stuff later on. Oh yeah, and if I get stuck in like a social psychology sounding rut and I'm using you guys, they can flag me down. I'm sure you're all from diverse backgrounds and all that. But again, on the theoretical side of things, I think looking at supernatural beliefs is really interesting because you have this interplay between people's evolved cognitive mechanisms and also other mechanisms that enable us to have cultural learning. And people's supernatural beliefs seem to emerge out of that interplay. And at the same time, people's supernatural agent beliefs in particular can trigger certain cognitive processes and also feedback into cultural evolutionary processes. So I'd say that a full understanding of human nature is actually impossible if you're not also trying to understand the psychology of people's supernatural beliefs. I'm not the first person to suggest that. You can go back to William James, who a lot of people say is one of the founders of modern psychology. And back in the early years of the 1900s, he gave a series of lectures that became his classic work, The Varieties of Religious Experience, which he subtitled A Study in Human Nature. More recently, you can look at E.O. Wilson in Consilience, where he's arguing that we should get past sort of disciplinary siloing, where these people are chemists and they can't talk to biologists can't talk to psychologists, saying that we need to sort of integrate cross disciplines a bit better. Throughout the book, he kind of flagged a few areas where he thinks this sort of an enterprise has been successful, and then a few that are kind of works in progress. He said that science basis in religion is the most interesting and possibly humbling challenge. Hey, this is really the key area for this sort of interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary pursuit. So, with that in mind, overall, my research at glance, I try to answer questions like, why is it that people tend to hold beliefs in various supernatural agents? How do these beliefs about supernatural agents actually affect people's online cognitive processing, and then even cultural and evolutionary processes over greater amounts of time? Or just broadly, what are the psychological causes and consequences of religious belief and disbelief? So, basically, I'm just trying to ask, what makes religion tick? What functions might religion serve? So, why do religions stick around over time? So, I'll do a break here and I'll talk about watches. So that here is my watch. It looks like this. So this watch I bought from a street vendor in Thailand. This might make you think that, well, maybe this isn't a real Rolex on my wrist. But from day to day, I really don't care if it's a real Rolex or not. I don't care if it's a true Rolex. I can look at it and say, hey, it's kind of beautiful and it serves various functions for me. So I can think that it's useful, even if I know it's not a real Rolex. That's kind of the approach I'm taking when I'm studying religion. I don't care too much about the truth value of religious claims. I'm more interested in looking at what are the possible psychological, cultural, evolutionary functions that religions might serve. So for the rest of the talk, I'll dive into the more research-based stuff instead of the big picture, who am I, what do I do? So I'll look at two kind of second lines of research. One of them is looking at what are possible social and cognitive and evolutionary functions or consequences of religious belief. So what do these beliefs do for people who adhere to them? And then what might the intergroup consequences be for people who are religious disbelievers? And I think that the second question doesn't make much sense unless you consider the first one. So any questions to this point?